Hello, this is Mrs. Vogt, and this is our first attempt at flipping the classroom this year. So stick with me. I'm going to get better technology so you can actually see me on the video. But I'm just going to talk today, and you're just going to hear my voice. So this last week, we have talked about the early people coming to North America, coming on the land bridge from Asia. They were called Paleolithic people. They were the first people, and Paleolithic means old stone. So the people who were the Paleolithic people, they at first lived in the Archaic period, which was 9,000 years ago and a little more than that. These people hunted, gathered nuts and berries. They moved with the seasons for their food. And then about 4,000 years went by, and the people formed larger communities. They made pottery and planted seeds, so they realized that they could stay in one place a little bit longer. And then the next period of the early people were the woodland people, the woodland period, and that was about 3,000 years ago. That's when corn arrived from traders from Mexico. People decided to stay in one place longer because they had more nutritious crops: squash, beans, corn, cucumbers, and so on. And when we think of the woodland people, that is who we think of when we think of the Native Americans when we study more recent Native American history, the last few hundred years. They also had a Mississippian influence that came. And the Mississippian influence on the Native Americans, it really caused them to build towns around the Mississippi River. And this is when the ceremonial centers were built, and the Native Americans really started, developing different ceremonies. And that bled into different tribes throughout the country. Now, you may take notes the way I did, replay this part, or you may do this in a sort of a timeline. We're going to move on to the North Carolina tribes. Okay, so the North Carolina tribes, way back, before the late 1500s, okay, they were still forming, but the Native Americans in North Carolina, by the late 1500s, their cultures were well organized, and they're pretty much the same tribes that are today in North Carolina. We're going to talk about mostly focusing on the Algonquin tribes. The Algonquin tribes is more of an Algonquin language. There are many tribes, and they have a common language with some variations. We're going to talk about the Tuscarora tribe, the Catawba tribe, which is the largest group, and of course the Cherokees, which are the Upper Cherokees, the Middle Cherokees, and the Lower Cherokees. First, I want you to get out your two North Carolina maps. We're going to first talk about the regions of North Carolina as they are today, so that we can relate those to the groups, the major Native American groups and tribes in North Carolina. Take out your two maps, and you want to have some colored pencils. In North Carolina today, we're going to call them four regions, four major regions. Depending who you talk to, in fourth grade, you might have just said there were three regions. And depending what site you go to and who you talk to, they might say there are five. So for our purposes, we're going to focus on four. And you're going to divide, and if my battery runs out, I will upload another video to tag onto this one. So if you see it go out, click on the next video. I have a feeling. Okay, the four regions of North Carolina, we have the mountains, the Piedmont, the coastal plain, and the Tidewater region. I'm going to let you go ahead. You can pause the video and draw the regions in North Carolina. So we have the mountains, and just be approximate there. The Piedmont, we're going to color that green. And Raleigh is right on the border of the Piedmont and the coastal plain, although it is in the Piedmont region. The coastal plain, and if you look at the water here, the sounds and the rivers, how they're coming in, you can kind of say that the tidewater region line is right on that border. And of course the tidewater region is bordered by the Atlantic Ocean. We're also going to mark our borders. Virginia to the north, South Carolina to the south, Georgia to the southwest, and Tennessee to the, depending on where you are, the west, the northwest. So go ahead and pause the video and color your map. Approximations are fine. I will show you another picture that you might want to look at to do the video here, or to do your map. Okay, so we're going to use this for discussions. You're going to put this in your interactive notebook if you haven't put it in there already. The last map that we're going to work on, which it fell, so here we go, is the major Native American tribes and groups in North Carolina. So now you have your one map with the regions. We're going to color another map, which are the Native American groups, and we'll talk about that in class, about what region they're in, and you can make those connections yourself, I'm sure. All right, so we have in the mountain region, okay, you can see about the same dividing line, we have the Cherokee group. There's the upper, the middle, and the lower. And in a project in class, you're going to focus on one of these groups and teach the rest of the class about them. So I'm not going to talk a lot of detail about them. The Cherokee, we're going to color orange, and that's they're part of the Iroquois-speaking nation. The Iroquois, who were a large tribe in New York. Some of the Iroquois moved down to North Carolina, and they formed their own tribes. So the Cherokee are Iroquois speaking. And then we have the Catawba, these are the Siouan speaking. And it's spelled S-I-O-U-A-N, that come from the Sioux Nation, the Sioux language, which I'm sure you've heard of the Sioux Indians. They moved from, some of this group moved from the west, moved over, and this is where more of the Siouan speaking Native Americans lived. And the Catawba tribe formed around this area. Okay, so far we have the Iroquois speaking on our key, orange, yellow, the Siouan speaking, and then we have another Iroquois speaking area of North Carolina. And the Tuscarora Native Americans were a large group that lived in that area. So we have the Cherokees and the Tuscarora, who were both from the Iroquois Nation, who had different dialects of the Iroquois language. So what I did is I just put some major tribes in these areas of North Carolina. There are many, many more tribes, but these are the ones we're going to focus on. They were the largest. And the last section is the Algonquin speaking. The Algonquin is an Algonquin language. The Algonquin speaking tribes lived near the coast, other than the Tuscaroras down here. So if you can see where I put my dividing lines there, and I will show you another map. I also wrote Croatan, C-R-O-A-T-A-N, Secotan, we can look that up in class, S-E-C-O-T-A-N, about how we say it, and the Pamlico. I'm going to look at a different version for you so you can see where some of those lines are. Might make it easier. Okay, so we have the Cherokee, Iroquois speaking. We have the Siouan speaking, and the Catawba were down here. We have the more Iroquois speaking, and the Tuscarora were here. And we have the Algonquin speaking tribes. And some of those tribes, as you can see, and you can't see it very well on this camera, there's a lot of tribes in North Carolina, major tribes, but we're just focusing on the largest ones. Okay, and some of these over here were the Croatans, which we're going to talk about the lost colony of Roanoke, so I put those on there, the Secotans or Secotans, and Pamlico. Your job for tonight is to have these two maps, the regions of North Carolina with your name on it, labeled and colored with the borders, the major Native American group or tribes in North Carolina with the key, put your name on it. You do not need to put the borders unless you wish. And just some notes that we took about the first peoples. They're called Paleolithic. There was the Archaic period. There was the Woodland period with the Woodland people. And then there was a big Mississippian influence came along. Have a good evening and happy coloring.